Hey everybody, I'm Wayne Baker with A Fair Recovery, and welcome back to this week's edition of our newsletter. The past few weeks we've been talking about the different forms of moral disengagement, and it got me to thinking about my own journey and the origins of my shame and where I have participated in some of these forms of moral disengagement. And I don't know about you, but as I look back at my life, I can't believe some of the things that I've done. And the earliest that I can remember as I rewound the videotape of my life, there's a thing that took place when I was in about third grade and I was living in a suburb of Dallas. And there was this girl in the neighborhood that was a little older than most of my friends, and she was really kind of mean to us. So we all banded together one evening and sat on my front porch and wrote all these, for third graders, naughty notes and drew ugly pictures and threw them in her mailbox. That was back in the day when the mailboxes were at the front door. And then we ran off and we rang the doorbell. Well, a couple hours later, the police showed up at every one of our houses. We didn't write our names on them, but I guess her parents called the police. They came to my house and I lied. So did my friends, but within the next couple of days, we all got caught. It's something that it haunts me to this day. I can't believe I did something that was so dehumanizing to another human being, regardless of how she treated all of us. I keep asking myself, why did I do something like that? What could cause an innocent little kid to do something like that out of the blue? So there are two more components of moral disengagement that I want to talk about today. And these two things are called dehumanization and the attribution of blame. These two practices of moral disengagement are based on how we view those we betray or mistreat. Hopefully, most of us were raised in families where we experienced joy and suffering along with those that we loved. And it's that experience that teaches us empathy. If we didn't have that experience, empathy can be really hard for us as adults. And being able to relate to the joy and the suffering of others is just part of the human experience. However, if we are able to blind ourselves to the human experience, then we're less likely to relate to those around us that experience pain. We won't understand it and we won't be able to experience it. It becomes more difficult for us to mistreat those that we respect without experiencing the pain. But it's really easy to act in harmful ways if we dehumanize them. For me to write or draw these ugly things so that I could just simply fit in with the cool kids was easy as long as I looked at my neighbor as something lower than myself, an object. If for just a moment I had considered how the pictures or my comments would have made her feel, then chances are that my conscience would have stepped in and I would have been able to refuse what they had wanted us to do. Instead, I allowed myself for a moment of bullying and violated my own beliefs to make myself feel better. Dehumanization is a much bigger deal than most of us realize, especially during wartime. Nations cast their enemies in the most dehumanizing, degrading, demonic images to make it easier to kill them. The process of dehumanization is an essential ingredient in the perpetration of humanities, and history is full of examples. It doesn't take us very much time to think of many of them. The same is true of infidelity. The injured spouse frequently is confused as to how their partner could do this to them. If the unfaithful spouse strips their spouse of human qualities by focusing only on their faults, they effectively dehumanize them and limit any empathic response. I see that every day in my practice. When dehumanization is in play, there is little, if any, consideration of the impact their betrayal will have on their spouse. Self-censure for cruel conduct can be disengaged by stripping people of their God-given human qualities. And once dehumanized, they are no longer viewed as persons with feelings, hopes, and concerns, but they're viewed as objects. And the same principle can hold true for those responding to betrayal. By labeling those unfaithful as nothing more than cheaters or narcissists, they effectively dehumanize their spouse as well, paving the way for additional inhuman treatment. To run your mate over with a car or to inflict bodily harm on a loved one requires seeing them as an object, not as a person. I'm reminded of what my mom taught me all my life. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And I know that's really hard and that's extreme in this kind of situation, but you see how dehumanization is so prevalent in our culture. So we're down to the last form of moral disengagement. And of all the previously mentioned ways people suspend their morals and values by having an affair, attribution of blame may be the most damaging of all. Blaming your partner or circumstances not only pushes away your guilt, but allows us to become a faultless victim. Guilt is then avoided by viewing your hurtful actions as circumstantial, rather than a personal decision or a choice. And remember, I've said it before, that I think one of the most fundamental things about being human is our free will and the choices that we make. Placing blame on others or on circumstances, our actions not only become excusable, but they now can feel like self-righteousness and justified in the process. Even worse, justifying our hurtful actions is often more damaging than the original situation. For example, it's easy to play the victim and justify your affair if you tell everyone your mate is controlling. And I cannot tell you how often I hear those exact words. Even more, the efforts of the hurt spouse to change and become less controlling only add greater justification for being unfaithful and potentially increase the sense of righteous indignation. Not only that, but by blaming your behavior on their being controlling, others will look down on the victim and also blame your spouse for your infidelity. I'm not saying that through this process, everybody has some things that they need to look at, but you see the attribution of blame and the impact that it can have. It's easy to justify verbal or physical abuse if your mate has cheated on you. You can be righteously indignant because you've never done that to them and you would never be acting this way if they hadn't betrayed you. But in the long run, we're all responsible for our actions. We will either see others as human and act according to our morals, especially when we're hurt, or we'll see them as objects and act with no regard as to the impact of our actions. The choice really is ours. When infidelity is cloaked in self-righteousness and defensiveness, the unfaithful bears the responsibility for what happens ultimately. So if you're willing to start this new year off with a new strategy for recovery, please consider our EMS online course. Registration starts very soon and you'll be able to find all the information on that on the website. So thanks for joining me on this 6-part journey through moral disengagement. I want to stress again, I say it, I think almost every week, none of it justifies an infidelity, but we get asked every day, how could you? And these are just some of the ideas as to the whys and how people got to where they got. It bears a conversation between you and your spouse. So I want to caution you as you're watching these videos, and maybe some of you, because I'm hearing these reports, you're sending them off to your spouse to look at them too. Be really careful about throwing stones. Certainly express your hurt and your pain and your sorrow, but be careful about, see this, here's what he's saying, here's what he just said, you do this, you do this. That's like looking for a speck in somebody else's eye when I got a log in my own. Be really careful about that. I know most of you, betrayed and unfaithful spouses, are experiencing more pain than maybe you've ever experienced in your life. And these are just some of the tools that we consider and we ask you to consider when the question, how could you do this to me, comes up. It's not everything, and not everybody does all of these, but it's just some things to help you two have a conversation around some of it. So thanks so much for joining us, and I'll see you again next week.